Well, South Africa is generally still a food secure nation, although the rise in numbers of people who are falling into the critical categories is a concern. South Africa's production of food has declined in large part due to stock and crop theft as well as water scarcity. But the most obvious concern being the actual price of food at the shops. For more on this, we are joined we're joined now online by the Executive Director of Agri SA, Christo van Rede. Christo, great to have you. Thanks so much for your time.
Good morning, and good morning to all of your viewers.
Crystal, we were just chatting a little bit briefly. You just said you've put the phone down to some of the farmers out there. How are they feeling? I mean, let's get a sense of where the farmers are at the moment.
Overall, farmers are quite worried about rising input costs. We've seen the negative impact of load shedding on many farmers. Farmers have lost a huge amount of poultry, for example. And that's not good. Farmers are also facing what they call load reduction. And that has another impact on farmers' ability to produce food. So overall, the sentiment is not very healthy. And we predict that farmers will even face further challenges as food inflation and input inflation continues to rise.
Yeah, I mean, I want to dwell a little bit about on the actual effects of load shedding, because we speak to the fact that the cold chain is being disrupted here, which is losing to a lot of losses for farmers. And I don't know if people actually even think further than, my electricity at home is not working. We don't necessarily realize the repercussions of something like this. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more as to how badly farmers are being affected by this load shedding.
Remember, farming, and especially commercial farming, is a modern practice. So you need electricity to drive your pivot systems. It takes approximately 10 hours for that irrigation pivot to complete the full cycle. During that time, you must you must water your plants. You must also feed your plants fertilizer. If that process is disrupted, you can think what it happens to your little seedlings. In addition to that, farmers need electricity to drive their machines, their packaging machines and so forth. And if those machines are disrupted, it can lead to further mechanical problems. And many of these parts need to be imported from overseas, so that then delays production on the factory floor. In addition to that, your entire cold chain system depends on electricity. And we've seen how this has impacted on the quality of products that we need to deliver to the shops. But in addition to that, your broilers, many of your other systems require electricity, and we've seen farmers experiencing huge losses, as poultry losses, as a result of shortage or load shedding.
Yeah. So I mean, these are things that are going to impact the price of food even more. I mean, we've got so many other influences that are happening right now, whether we talk about the war in Ukraine, but perhaps let's dwell on that for a second. So we've spoken to what our farmers are going through locally. I mean, we haven't even gone deeply into it, but some of the effects of load shedding. I mean, the problem is with certain areas experiencing drought as well. That is one big issue. But now internationally, with things in the Ukraine, the war in the Ukraine, how is that affecting us?
Remember, when the war broke out, it was just after we were experiencing massive lockdowns throughout the world. So we've seen a massive disruption in the global supply chain. And that has resulted in shortages. And we all know what happens when there's a shortage, the price immediately goes up. So we've seen a massive spike in the price of fertilizer, a massive spike in the price of diesel and petrol. And we've also seen a massive spike in the cost of shipping, for example. Shipping lines are now charging us enormous amounts because there's fewer ships on the sea, and that leads to price increases. But in addition to that, we've seen a global problem. Inflation is on the rise. Only here in South Africa, we are still, our inflation rate is still manageable, sits at approximately 6.6%. But United States, United Kingdom, Spain sits at 10%, Argentina 64%, Venezuela at 167%. And this, when there's a spike in the price of food, it obviously leads to further food inflation, which makes it unaffordable for your household to buy food. And that leads to hunger not only at household level, but also at the global level.
Yeah. I mean, Crystal, when we look at that food basket and we talk about the fact that that food basket has gone up, we comprise this basket of 44 foodstuffs that we look at and say, well, this is what South Africans tend to buy most. 44 of them, 40 of them have gone up they've gone up so much, I think well over 10%. I mean, we're looking at cooking oil that has gone up 69%. Spinach up 39%, flour up 24%, chicken livers I see here have gone up 24%, and something like cremora up 23%. And the reality is that from what I'm hearing, that this is expected to increase even further. Is that the concern?
That for us is a very big concern. But only not, the entire food chain is influenced by various external factors, logistical cost, transport cost in general, electricity cost. All of these things contribute to the price increases that we are currently experiencing. But I want to confirm that farmers are not instrumental in the rise in terms of food prices, because farmers are price takers. And that makes us very, very worried, because farmers are under tremendous pressure. And if farmers do not make a sustainable profit on the products that they produce, those farmers will just leave the business, will get out of the business. And I always say it is not, and I want to emphasize this, it is not land that produces food, but it's expertise. And if we stand to lose that expertise, as a country, we're going to be in big trouble. And that's why we need all stakeholders to sit around the table and find solutions for the challenges that farmers are experiencing at this point in time.
So how many farmers are we losing? I mean, let's be real about this. You're bringing up a very important aspect here, where we are losing the skills, where perhaps farmers are feeling like they are working, against the system, whether we're talking about electricity, which we've touched on. Obviously, there's not much we can do about, the fact that the rains are also something that they are not seeing much of at this moment. Fuel prices are going through the ceiling right now, and there are many, many issues that, whether we talk to labor as well, there are a lot of things that get to the farmers right now. But in terms of the drainage, the skills, these farmers leaving and deciding that they'd rather shut up businesses, how big is that? How huge is this problem?
A recent study indicated that we stand to lose 1 out of 5 farmers within the next couple of years. And that for us is a big concern. And the biggest driver for people quitting the industry is the fact that financing has become too expensive. And the amount of risk that farmers face have just become completely overbearing. So overall, I think those are the two factors: financing, as well as how do you assist farmers in managing the various risks that they face. And one of the big risks, obviously, relates to electricity, load shedding, load reduction, as well as crime. We've seen a massive spike in crime, and all farmers face challenges, whether you're black or white. Criminals are out there to come and either steal your livestock or clamp down on your family, or they will come and steal copper cables on your farm, etc. So those are big challenges that farmers face at this point in time. And what we need to do as stakeholders, we'll have to sit down and say, how do we protect our farmers? When young people come to me, they say, Mr. Van der Rede, I want to farm. I said, rather take your money and open up a Kentucky franchise. You stand to make much more profit. In farming, your margins are very low. But you can open up Kentucky's. But if you don't have a poultry farmer to produce the primary product, then it doesn't make any sense to open up a franchise, a Kentucky franchise. So it's important that we need to take care of our farmers and make sure that the new generation of farmers that we are trying to establish, that those farmers do what they can do best, and that is to produce food for the country.
Yeah. Let's talk about the foodstuffs that have been affected the most. Obviously, we've got the grain industry, we've got vegetables as well, we've got the meat industry. So where are we seeing that South Africans are really struggling? Because, we hear about the fact that there are many South Africans that go to bed starving and are dying of starvation. I mean, this is the reality. But let's look at the different sectors. Where are we doing okay, and where are you particularly worried when it comes to the farming industries?
Obviously, the shortage of wheat is a big concern for us, because wheat is you need wheat to, at the end of the day to bake bread, and it's important that we do not neglect our wheat stocks. But given the fact that the global economies remain open, we could source wheat from other countries. And also part of the Orange Free State farmers, they are now producing wheat, and that's very good. But our big concern also relates to our maize stocks. Now, we've done quite well during the past couple of seasons, but the maize price remains high. And that, again, has an impact on feed for your poultry and feed for your cattle. Our bigger concern, obviously, is with vegetables. Due to the rise in the cost of fertilizer, we've seen an upward trend in the price of vegetables. Our meat prices have, to a large extent, stabilized. So I think we will see cheaper meat going forward. But then, in addition to that, your edible oils, also a massive spike in the price of edible oils, because we have imported such a lot of sunflower oil from the Ukraine. But one thing that we must not compromise, we must not close down our borders for exports and imports. Yeah. The global economy must remain open. We must continue to source from other countries so that we can just maintain our stock levels in South Africa. And we must also encourage other nations not to implement protection or protective measures, because that will lead to complete shutdown of your local stocks and the export of that to various countries.
So, Christo, if we have to look at the water shortages at the moment in the Eastern Cape as well, and, we keep talking to the fact that we sitting on day zero, the President was visiting the area yesterday as well. Yes, of course, putting forward a more positive message, but what is the reality on the ground? I suppose that's the one way of finding it out, is when you speak to somebody that actively knows. I mean, in terms of farming in the Eastern Cape and how bad the situation is there for farmers?
People always blame farmers that we are the biggest water users. But I always say farmers usually stand last in the line when it comes to water distribution. We get the leftover. It's first your households that must receive water, and then secondly, your various industries that are in towns, and then your farming sector. Now, what I want to emphasize is we had very, very good raining seasons, and that in itself is a massive blessing for South Africa. So yes, we are not too concerned about rain prediction for the next season, although we're a bit worried about what's happening in the Western Cape. But our problem is not water availability. Our problem is water management. Yeah. And your local municipalities, your water department must take full responsibility for that. It is unacceptable that municipalities do not take care of the basic needs that they are supposed to take care of. They are mandated to ensure basic service deliveries in terms of water, etc., maintaining infrastructure, also making sure that there's proper planning in terms of future water supplies, because our towns are growing. And they must make sure that they have enough water supply for people that are moving into cities. And that's why our biggest problems sit. I don't think we should condone or allow these type of complete neglect when it comes to water supply. People that are responsible for that are not delivering on it must be held accountable.
Yeah. Finally, Christo, as I let you go, there must be solutions. I mean, we talk about the management of water and many other issues that farmers need in order to keep on producing food and to ensure that South Africans are fed. I mean, I was just reading, and obviously these are not, figures that are the latest figures, but, we do have a big problem. I mean, when we talk about the fact that 7% of the population is struggling with severe food insecurity, that's 7%, we're talking 4 million people that do not have food, that are struggling to get food right now. And this was in 2019. I mean, that's not even taking into account a pandemic and what we're going through right now. What can government do? What help do the farmers need to ensure that we remain a food-stable country?
Maintain law and order. You cannot farm in a far-flung area, and you have to lie awake all night and worry about the safety of your workers, safety of your family, etc. Law and order is critical. Secondly, we need to produce more fertilizer locally and open up that space so that fertilizer is more cheaper. You know what has happened in Sri Lanka, where the government has decided to impose a ban on the use of chemical fertilizer, and that has led to major hunger. And then thirdly, policy stability. We cannot have a situation where farmers are threatened with expropriation without compensation. It's silly. It's a silly idea. And then thirdly, we need to put the right measures in place, financial assistance, mentoring assistance, and so forth for your emerging farmers so that they also form part of the bigger value chain. And then last but not least, we must ensure a reliable electricity supply and ensure that our roads are in a good state, our harbors are in a good state, because we're part of a global value chain. And that needs to be optimized as effectively as possible so that we can ensure a continuously and regular food supply, whether we export or import.
All right, we leave it there. Christo, thank you. Thanks very, very much for talking to us. Christo van Heerden, he's the Executive Director of Agri-SA, talking to us about food security in South Africa and what needs to be done to ensure that we keep the food security the way it is, but improve it, because it is at a very fragile situation and prices of food is just going through the ceiling right now. It really is, and you and I both know that. All right, before we head up to the news at 8 o'clock, let's review our question of the